Well, hello everyone, and welcome to Global Accessibility Day. So, our focus on a day like this is really on inclusion and digital access for everyone. But today we're actually going to do things a little bit differently. We're not going to bore everyone to death with a PowerPoint presentation. We're going to do a bit more of an interview, casual style format. Um, and an environment where we really encourage everyone who's watching to ask some questions. I have some pre-prepared questions that I'm going to run through, and I encourage everyone else to pop theirs in the chat. But before we get into that, maybe let's start with some introductions. So I'm happy to kick off. My name is Jaslyn Hughes. I'm the Global Manager for Customer Value Design. I've been in educational technologies for about 15 years, I reckon, and working with Moodle for maybe the last 10, and been in some technical and some business roles, but always really, really close with our customers. And I'm coming to you live from freezing South Australia. Ladek, what about you?
Freezing South Australia. It's really hard to wrap my brain around that. My name is Ladek. I'm the principal of e-learning advocacy at OpenLMS. I have been reporting on news, information resources, and stuff like AI and accessibility for learning in general, but mostly for the online learning space since 2015. I'm a part of the team here at OpenLMS that puts on events like we'll talk about a little later. Our AI and AI and Learning Summit that's coming up in June. I run our podcast called the eLearn Podcast. I run our magazine/blog called the eLearn Magazine, eLearn Magazine, and I'm thrilled to be here. And I forgot to, the reason I chuckled is because I am here in Mexico City, Mexico.
Much, much warmer than being down in South Australia, I bet.
I'm not going to lie to you. It is.
All right, let's jump into it. So I guess first cab off the rank then, what is accessibility?
What is accessibility? So, a good friend of ours and a colleague of ours, Michael Vaughn, I love his description about, what accessibility is, because ultimately accessibility comes from access, right? How do you access something, or do you have the ability to access something? So when we think of learning, he uses the analogy of a sidewalk. And, as we are, as you're going along the sidewalk in a place like Australia, sometimes here in Mexico, but, in Europe and other places of the world, they'll put that apron that goes down to the curb. And that allows a different type of access onto that sidewalk than, somebody who maybe is able-bodied or, can walk normally, to have access to that. So when we think about accessibility and learning, we're thinking about what are the ways that we can present learning and deliver learning so that anyone, anywhere, anytime can access that learning and benefit from it. So that's what we mean.
Yeah, amazing. So as we know, OpenLMS, we do online learning management systems. So digital accessibility is something that's super important for us. And for all of the LMS admins that we might be having watching with us live, do we need to worry about that?
Ultimately, yes. The answer is yes. We want to worry about accessibility because, at least from my perspective, accessibility isn't something that we want to focus on that small percentage of people who may have, let's just say, visual impairment, or maybe somebody who has audio impairment, because that's usually, I was even watching today, Apple just announced some new accessibility tools that they're going to be putting either into their operating system or into some of their digital devices. And I noticed that all of the headlines were like, hey, look, people who are visually impaired can now have audio, and I think that's wonderful, because that's where most of us go in that. But really, accessibility is, and this comes from Gavin, who's with our partner over at Brookfield Labs. We have to think of accessibility as something that really is addressing the 99.9% of us that are taking part in learning in any space, especially in online learning. And here's the reason why. And the reason why it's important for an LMS administrator to think about this is because accessibility is not only about permanent impairments or impairments that prevent us from learning, in those small percentage cases. But imagine that you or I are trying to access learning in a loud office, right? So you and I are then impaired in a way because maybe we can't actually listen to a video, or maybe, if the video is on, we're not gonna be able to hear it because there's too much noise in the office, or we don't want to disturb our colleagues. So that's a form of needing accessibility. That's a moment where we need accessibility. And so as an LMS administrator, I need to think about the fact, am I able to deliver this content with a transcript or with subtitles or in some other way so that auditory or the audio version of that lesson can be transmitted and can be absorbed by the learner. Another piece to think about is, where in my LMS and where, what are the pieces in my LMS where accessibility may be important to us? And a great example is just, what's called the alt tags for images, right? So if image doesn't come up, we've all seen this happen again. You go to a website, maybe it hasn't been updated, or maybe your browser's a little outdated, or something hasn't happened, and instead of seeing the image, you see this like little X or this little box, right? What's supposed to happen there, and every modern browser does this, is there's supposed to be text there that describes what's actually supposed to be there. That's called the alt text. And so for every LMS, LMS admin, one of the things that we need to be thinking about is, how do I ensure that alt text is a part of every image that's across the learning management system? Now, if you think about that, that's a pretty big lift, especially if we're talking about somebody who's had an LMS running online in a school system or in a campus for a long time. That's thousands of courses. That could be tens of thousands of pages and hundreds of thousands of images. So why it's important for an LMS admin comes down to this. How are you working with your team, your instructional designers, your professors, your teachers, whomever is creating and building the content for learning, to put accessibility into the workflow of learning development? That's really, one of the huge key messages that we want to have come out of Accessibility Day this year, is building it into the workflow means that it's getting done along the way, and it's not just something that you're tacking on to the end, right? And it's not an afterthought or something that, oh, hey, maybe we'll budget for if we have time. It's something that happens all of the time, in every course and everything that you put out there. And I want to circle back with this answer to that first example I gave of the sidewalk, where, if you build the sidewalk and you don't put those aprons in, during that design process and the construction process, and then, oh, wait, I'm the person who owns the building or whatever. And then, the lawyer comes and knocks on the door and says, hey, you actually have to, do this for the sidewalk. You have to put those aprons in. I now have to go back and break down the sidewalk and take off the corners and, and remold it. And the same thing is happening in learning. So rather than building your courses and then thinking about how you make them accessible, let's just do it from the beginning.
Yeah, amazing. And some of that actually sounds pretty overwhelming. Like if we're thinking of a school or a university that has thousands of courses, potentially tens of thousands of images that might need that alternative text, we're all pretty time poor. So is there any kind of tools available that we could use to help with some of that?
100%, and, this is going to bleed into maybe, the second half of our conversation here about AI and those kinds of things. But one of the tools that we have is with our partner Brickfield Labs, and they have something called the Brickfield Accessibility Tool. And what they've done over at Brickfield Labs is they've actually created this tool that will look through your entire LMS and make recommendations for things that need to be changed specifically for accessibility. And I'll give you one example. From the early days of the internet till recently, actually many people still do it today. In order to write bold text, right, you have the hashtag, not hashtag, sorry, the two carets with a B in it, and then you have the other two carets at the end of a word or a sentence that does /B, and that's how we used to do bold. But the real way you're supposed to do it now, or the accepted practice now, is to use the word strong. But, in your LMS, you may have thousands and thousands of instances where people just went bold, or, maybe the auto editor, or, you had an old version of it, or you have, some old hard coded HTML in there where people didn't change it. And so something that like the Brickfield accessibility tool can do, it can go through and automatically find those. And in some cases, in some instances, I know that luckily, having known Gavin, the head of Brickfield over there, they don't necessarily change everything on the fly, But they definitely will give you a huge list of recommendations that say, hey, look, here's where all those bold, anchor marks are. And, do you want me to update them, or you can go through and update them? So this is a huge lift for LMS administrators by going through and using Brickfield's tool, because, we're literally talking about thousands and thousands of person hours done in,
Yeah.
I don't want to say the snap of a finger, but much, 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 it's a huge time saver, right? Depends on
Two
how
snaps of
big
a
your
finger.
yeah.
Yeah, amazing. Actually, one of the things that you mentioned towards the beginning was about videos, and if you're in a busy office environment, kind of made me think of a little bit of a story. I did my entire degree online, a Bachelor of Business Management. Um, and I also work from home. So I'm not actually in an office environment, but I'm actually a really terrible student. And I have a terrible habit of sitting on the couch and putting something on the TV and then watching all of my videos with captions. Um, so for me, like just having that background noise, being able to read the captions, or even sometimes if it's a really complex topic, like some of the economic stuff that I did, you listen to it, I'm not quite absorbing it. But if I can read the transcript and watch the video, listen to the video at the same time, it really helps me synthesize some of that learning.
100%. And, I think about, I'm lucky enough, I have 3 kids, kind of all different stages of kidhood right now. Right. I've got a teenager in high school. I've got an almost teenager in middle school on this side of the planet. That's how we say it. And then I've got a primary school student as well, an elementary school student, and watching how they interact with their different types of learning and watching what they need or what their preference is. I couldn't agree with you more. Everyone has their own individual learning preferences. Everyone has their own individual learning needs. And, we're especially in this age that we're in right now, where we are all learning all the time, all the way
Mm,
through, even the recommendation about just how to stay mentally healthy is, stay creative, stay curious, continue learning through your whole life. I'm thinking about the person who decides to take an online course and, has to commute home on a bus or a train or something like that, right? In order to access that course, not only are they going to have to think about transcripts or those kind of things, think about just, you have to translate a course into a digital device, right? So like maybe a
yeah.
smartphone that's much smaller than a laptop screen or a desktop. So these are the pieces that we need to think about. And I love how you brought it back to that. We really want to remember that this is about the 99% of people who are learners, not just that small fraction of people who may have some specific need.
Yeah. Excellent. So, are we ready to move on to the second half of what we'd like to talk about, which is AI and AI in learning in particular, and how that can help with accessibility? And maybe just start with a very basic question. Could take us forever to get through, but we'll do what we can. What is AI?
So what is artificial intelligence? What is machine learning? What are these things that, heretofore we kind of all had in the back of our head, this could happen someday. And now over the last 4 or 5 months, with the advent of what are called generative AIs, that means they generate new stuff with ChatGPT or Bard or, some of the other tools that are out there. It seems like you can't turn a corner without that becoming, a conversation these days. At the end of the day, all artificial intelligence is a set of rules, right? That's what any AI tool is. It's a set of algorithms or a set of rules that looks at a set of data that is provided to it, and then those rules then tell it how to interpret that data and provide results to you. That's the simplest definition of what artificial intelligence does. The thing about machine learning and the thing about these tools that we're creating like ChatGPT or whatnot is that they actually can go back into that data set over and over again, and they can listen to your answer, and that algorithm can update what it thinks the correct answer is. And so just like you or
Mm,
I, it appears to be learning what the outputs need to be in order to answer the questions or produce the result that you want to have. But
yeah.
but quite frankly, the artificial intelligence applications that we are looking at today are quite new in our view. but they've been, these have been in development for years. And you and I have been using artificial intelligence for years and years now. Anytime you open up Uber, anytime you open up Google Maps, anytime you are, located somewhere in the world and it's following you around. These are all AI pieces that are looking at just ginormous data sets and asking questions about, for instance, let's just take, a maps application like Apple Maps, Google Maps, it's really popular here in Mexico, Waze, where, how do they know that traffic is going to stop, 50 kilometers away from me? They know that by listening to all of the, all of this massive amount of data that's being pumped into the system by everybody who has the app open, analyzing that data, and then, feeding it back to your personal device. That's AI in a nutshell. And so when we apply it to learning, it is, what are the algorithms or the rules that we're using in order to look at a data set in your school, in your what's the word I'm looking for? Not just your school, but your district or your state or your province or whatever it is. It really depends on how narrow or wide you have that data set be. And then, what are the answers that we're asking it to come back with?
Yeah, amazing. And so broad as well. Actually made me think of a meme that I saw not that long ago, which was about one of the Terminators, in the Terminator movie, Skynet, and he's looking at a piece of paper going, well, we're not going to be able to rise up against the humans if all you're doing is keeping me reviewing your assignments.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, and I think that's, so, one of the things that is we're struggling with, and again, I don't want to distract from here, but, this is what we're going to be talking about the AI and Learning Summit we're going to be talking about what tools are available today, what's coming down in the, the near or not so near future. And then that a third track for us is, what are these challenges that we're dealing with in the learning space as well around, around AI too.
Yeah. Sounds really exciting. So, I mean, aside from the fact, like, AI has been around for so long, even though it at the moment seems like the latest shiny thing, how can we draw that back into accessibility, and how can it really help us there?
Sure, absolutely. So, a couple of really obvious things that pop to mind. First of all, like, as we talked about earlier, if you have a video or audio that you have created, and you want to make that accessible, one of the things that you want to do is you want to generate subtitles and you want to generate transcripts so that someone can read the material, not necessarily have to watch it or listen to it, right? So even a tool like Microsoft Word right now, believe it or not, it's already incorporating AI tools where you can take your audio file or take your video file, actually ask Word to listen to it through the dictate function, and it'll actually automatically generate a transcript for you. Another tool that's out there right now is from 11 Labs, and that is natural speech generators that from text, right? So I can, let's just say I create a paragraph, or, I've written my lecture for my class today, and I need to be able to create an audio file for that, again, for some side of the house that needs to hear, needs the audio file. I can put that text in there and it actually generates, an audio, a file that no human creates, right? It's actually just generating this voice that sounds remarkably nice. And, we've all heard that already in something like Alexa or something like Google Home, or right, where these are surprisingly nice voices that, every now and then you can hear, okay, yeah, that's a robot, but it's getting better and better.
Yeah.
A couple other ones that I want to think about is, even like, for example, so image recognition tools, right? So there are tools out there. I know actually Brickfield does this, as well as there's another one called Seeing AI. There's an iPhone app from Microsoft, and there's other ones where we can actually go in to, through your LMS and look at those images and start to generate some of that alt text. Now, reading an image or having a machine look at an image and then try to interpret what that image is, I mean, that's still that's a tough game. And so it's still a really highly recommended that anything is generated like that a human actually goes back and looks at it and, confirms that that's what's actually in the image. But still, to take a lot of the work off of your plate and create that efficiency, I think, those are just some really great examples, because at the end of the day, that's what we're using AI for right now, right? We're using it to create efficiencies. There's a few more that we're going to be showcasing in that tools of today portion of the summit as well, where there's tools that are available on the market today, where generating a course plan, generating a course outline, automatically building the SCORM files for that course and whatnot that'll go into your LMS. These are all ready to go today, and they're actually it's kind of like magic. So
Oh my God. It
so
sounds like it.
not only are we building out these things with generative tools rapidly, but then, when you mix that with the accessibility equation, again, circling back to the very beginning, let's put that into the workflow right now, so that we're using these efficiencies that we have to actually, serve the whole pie.
Yeah, amazing. I mean, oh, it just gets me super excited. Like, how much work can I get something like ChatGPT to do for me? Um,
Yeah.
um, yeah, we did have a question in the chat about Tom Grant's currently typing out a transcript and would like more information on how to do that in Word. Is that something that will be covered in the AI and Learning Summit?
100%. I believe that this is something, if he doesn't cover it, we'll make sure to cover it. But our colleague, again, Michael Vaughn, this is one of his favorite things to do, right? Where after you and I get done with this, he'll pull the audio down, and quite literally he will drop the audio into that dictate function in Microsoft Word, and it will actually, it can distinguish between voices, so that break into
Oh,
paragraphs,
wow.
break it into different people, et cetera, et cetera. And so these tools exist today. They're here right
Yeah.
now. Anybody who's ever seen any social media right now, you go on TikTok, or you go on Instagram Reels, or whatever, YouTube Shorts, and you see, everybody seems to have subtitles in their shorts these days. There's any number of tools and organizations out there right now that are generating transcripts on the fly. And so this is something that educators and course, and instructional designers and whatnot should be using immediately.
Yeah, that's really, really cool stuff. So at OpenLMS, do we use AI at all?
We do it through partners right now, right? So our technology is not, we're rapid. Actually, I was working with our product leads, or discussing this with them pretty very recently, as it applies to the summit, because as we built out the summit, we found that there's a lot of great connections. Everything from, like I said, building out courses and building out classes to, there's actually a really cool topic where the people will be presenting, actually, they look at an entire school curriculum using IBM's tools called the 360 tool by IBM. And they look at an entire curriculum, sorry, not a curriculum, an entire database from a state here in Mexico. And they see if they can detect bias, gender bias,
wow.
in whether or
Yeah.
not, dismissals or pass fail or grades or certifications. And I'm not going to do any spoilers there, but very, very, excuse me, very, very interesting results that came out of that, that are now affecting policy, and so
Yeah.
all of this stuff is available. But today with OpenLMS, especially if someone's using OpenLMS or considering it, our new partner that we just announced recently, CopyLeaks, huge AI player in that when you're looking at authenticity of learning. So that's one of the big challenges, the big concerns with ChatGPT coming out right now, are coming out, and is the material that my student or my learner is submitting, is that authentic? And so Sho, who's the CRO at CopyLeaks, he's actually going to be talking at the summit here about how the research they've done over the last 6 months about who is using it, who's not using it, how does that vary amongst age groups, and then what happens when you just let students know that, yes, we know you use this, and we know we are actually checking whether or not you use AI. How does that actually transform the educational experience? So he's going to be talking about that and the data that they have. Again, really fascinating. Excuse me. And then another partner of ours named Class, which is an application that is built on top of Zoom. And so it uses the same functionality of Zoom to create basically a redefined and rethought, asynchronous experience for a classroom, right? So rather than just, you and I and 30 other people in these little boxes. It actually incorporates a whole bunch of other tools about being able to share presentations and resources in real time. And you don't have to pop in and out of the app. You can, bubble people up to the top who are raising their hands, all kinds of fascinating and really effective tools for instructors who are delivering asynchronously. But they've already announced that they've built in a generative, I believe it's through OpenAI. Don't quote me on that, into class itself, so that learners can use this on the fly in the classroom and use it for, group presentations, use it for class, for group work, use it for peer-to-peer reviews, those kinds of things as well. So yeah, those are just a couple of examples off the top of my head of partners of OpenLMS that, you could raise your hand today and turn them on.
Yeah, amazing. I love the idea of class and trying to bring some of that, classroom experience into an online environment. I think that would be really great. It's something that's missing from an online learning perspective. Just as a, someone who's been in that space as an online student for a few years, it can be really challenging.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah.
Should we maybe go a little bit deeper into the AI discussion, and maybe let's have a little bit of a talk about ethics, because that is something that a lot of people are concerned about. And so what are maybe some of the things that we should think about around ethics when we're looking at using AI?
So if I had my crystal ball, I think this is really, you've just nailed hit the nail on the head in terms of where is the consternation, where is the where are the really tough decisions and the tough conversations happening around this. Because it's one thing to have that magical moment where you type something in a chat GPT and whoa, hey, wow, they wrote a whole paper, or geez, here's my whole course plan, in 30 seconds. At the end of the day, what I think we need to remember is that it's still just a base of rules. It's a rule box or a rule book that is looking at a set of data. And so when we think about it in those terms, we have to remember that every data set is only as good as the data that went into it. So this goes all the way back to the 1940s and 50s, where it was, if you put garbage into the data, that you're going to get garbage out of the system, right?
Yeah.
And that's just a really stark reminder for all of us that while magic seems to happen in these tools, we really, really need to stay focused on the fact that a human needs to make the critical decision about whether or not it's valid, whether or not it's real, whether or not it's true or false, whether or not it's acceptable to even put out in a public space or use it. And that's just, I think that's the most important ethical consideration around, or, the most important safety and ethical consideration for using these tools. But then when we take that and go a little further, we also want to think about, how are we ensuring that the digital divide is not going to get even bigger than what we have today? Because you or I right now, we're lucky enough to be sitting here online. You're in Australia, I'm in Mexico. We're talking here. That just the underlying functionality and technology that you and I have access to is fairly robust, and something that you and I don't think about very often. But there's still billions of people in the world who don't even have access to these devices. I was just at a conference last October, so 6 months ago. It's called EDUCAUSE. It was in this case, it was in Colorado, where two of the major presentations were about universities that are providing devices and providing access to online learning to a pretty hefty section of their learners at these university ecosystems, like the University of California system, if I remember correctly. And I think the other one was in Wisconsin, or like Northwestern area. And it's quite incredible, because not only do we have to think about, do I even have access to get online? Do I have access to a tool? But then we have to think about the expertise behind that tool, right? So if I give you, if I were to give you a, and who knows, maybe you're a master woodworker, but if I give you a skill saw, I really have no idea. Maybe I don't know. So, but if I were to give you a skill saw from a woodworking shop, and I just handed it to you, would you even know how to turn it on? Would you know what blades to use? Would you not? And the answer is no. Yeah, you really wouldn't. And so the same thing applies when we talk about these AI tools and whatnot, that we need to think about how are we going to make sure that we're not making that problem worse, and that we're including everybody. And that just kind of brings it back to that inclusiveness of the theme of today. And then, I think the ethical piece that I alluded to earlier, just about having a human check things, is what's in these data sets. We heard recently that the developers at Samsung, global technology organization, they wanted to check their source code, and so they put it in ChatGPT to have it checked. Guess what? Now ChatGPT, it's in the system, and so those people probably are having really bad work weeks, but so we have to think about, there's also cases where, image generation, where there's tools out there that can create images for you. And so again, it looks like magic and it's really fascinating, but then are these data sets actually using copyrighted material or authentic, original material in order to then generate the images? And at what point does that bleed over into copyright infringement and the use of someone's intellectual property incorrectly? So these are some of the, some of the ethical considerations we want to think about. And I by no means, have the answers, but come to this summit, we'll check them out. There's gonna be a lot of conversations around that. I know, like, for one of the people that we're gonna have presenting, his name is Joe Pringle, and he works with Amazon Web Services. He's one of our partners at OpenLMS, and he's actually, this is where he's taking his presentation right now, is, what are these considerations as the pace of change, accelerates, because the genie's out of the bottle, and as more and more people use it, what are these ethical considerations that we need to think about? And that's going to be a great presentation.
Yeah. Actually, just like one of the points that you mentioned about having that human look at things to validate that the information that's coming out of something like ChatGPT is correct. If there are any educators on the call, think about how you might be able to use that in an assignment. Like, you could propose that students, put a question into ChatGPT, and depending on how good their question is, they could get an assignment piece and evaluate what ChatGPT has put in there and look at those things like, is it valid? Is it using any copyrighted information? Things like that. I mean, that could be a really good learning piece for students.
Yeah, and it's a huge learning piece. And then, to take your example and go one step further, that is like, so what's the second question you then ask the chat? Because one of the things I've noted with a lot of generative tools that people, that most users are doing, is they'll open it up, they'll ask one question, they'll get the answer, then they'll walk away. And then they'll come back and ask another question, then they'll walk away. They'll take the answer. Whereas these are actually built to have conversations. So when something like ChatGPT or Bard or whatever it is delivers you an answer, and let's just use your example, about some historical event, and gives you that paragraph, you can actually say, okay, in sentence 2, tell me more about that sentence, or hey, what else happened on that date in 1776, and so you really need to think about these generative tools as something that you're actually interacting with to demand more of it. And again, that brings us back to the human nature of, interacting with these tools, and a piece that I think should give heart to educators all around the world and school systems all around the world, because at the end of the day, what we're revealing right now in this conversation is that the tool is only as good as the question that you can ask it, right?
Yes, absolutely.
And so ultimately, developing the expertise in whatever topic that you want, or developing the expertise that you're trying to get to, that's how you ask that better question. That's how that's how you know to ask that more refined question. That's also how you know how to be critical about the information that you're getting. So I take great comfort in the fact that, assuming that we're all willing to do that work to get there, right? That's, building expertise in the human is really the ultimate goal in these tools of efficiency.
Yeah, I love it. So one of the things that you've mentioned, AI is based on data sets. There are algorithms that help it sort of sort out, how does a human think? So how should I apply all of this and, generate a response? So if it's built by a person or a group of people, could there be a bias in it based on how they've written it and the data sets that they use?
Oh, 100%. I mean, anybody who's on the call right now, I'm sure is familiar with the term unconscious bias, right? You and I
Mm.
don't even realize the assumptions that we make. It's just like what I just said earlier. I don't know if you know how to use the skill saw, right? Like I could make some assumptions, but that would be just my cultural bias coming out that, I'm a tall white guy from the United States, right? So who knows what sort of things I bring to the table. And that same thing happens uh, with these tools. So the person who builds them or the team of people who build these tools, they the way that those rule sets are built ask the questions a certain way, right? Or the rule set works a certain way. The data set that you are working on was built by people, or that data came in. Let's take the example I was saying earlier, that school system in the state of Guanajuato here in Mexico. All of that data came from teachers who are in the state of
Mm.
Guanajuato, who are Mexican, who filled out those forms or inputted the data, right? So they had those biases already in them, in their culture, right? So that unconscious bias around them. And so this is again where we need to think about what are the biases I'm bringing to the table, uh, and what are the things that I can't even see, or may not even be able to be aware of because they're so ingrained in either my culture or who I am or what my background is. And how can these tools actually help us to detect those things?
Mm. Yeah, great. It reminds me actually of a question that was posed to ChatGPT once when it first came out. So maybe it's a little bit better now. It was about identifying I think it was the top 10 female poets throughout history. And I think three or four of them that were on the list were actually male. So it still has it still has a little bit of work to go.
Well, and think about this. So our colleague, you and I have a colleague, his name's Christian Duque. I work with pretty closely with me. And one of the things that he put into one of our chats recently, he's like, it just dawned on me how US centric Chat GPT is. Right. But then
Mm.
in the same breath, he acknowledged the fact that one of the blessings or curses of the United States is that it has been creating enormous amounts of content for a very, very long time. And so when you think about this bias question that you're talking about, who are and what are the parts of the world that have been online the longest and have, just been pumping out content because that's the only data set that a lot of these tools have to work from. And so you're
Mm.
going to get biased answers, or it's going to seem like all those answers come from those data sets, right? So uh, naturally it would seem logical that if the machine can only look at that data set and doesn't know
Yeah.
there are other options, um, that you would always get answers like you just said, or who are the most famous scientists in the world, or who have made the most
Yeah.
famous discoveries in the world. You're going to get back answers that again, this is where we come back to a human has to take that critical
Yeah.
look and then ask this next question, or
Yeah.
ask a better question where it's like, who are the most famous scientists globally, or from, Nigeria, or from Uganda, or from, wherever, so that we tease out those answers and that we break down those walls.
Yeah. Amazing. So I guess we really need to understand that, yes, something like ChatGPT could be a really powerful resource that we could use, but also at the same time understanding its limitations in terms of biases, the underlying data sets, and things like that.
100%. Yeah. And I'll offer you up in a very interesting question, or I think is a question that a lot of individuals are going to struggle with over the next couple of years as we get more and more comfortable with the efficiencies, with more comfortable with the output that generative products like ChatGPT and Bard and whatnot are enabling for us. So imagine, if you're an instructional designer, or you're a course creator, or you're a teacher, building your courses and planning them and putting that is a significant chunk of time.
Mm.
If we now have gotten to a level of confidence where we can build those courses in quite literally a fraction of the time. What used to take hours now takes seconds. What used to take months now only takes a day. What are you going to do with all that other time? right? And that
That is
is,
an excellent question.
it's a beautiful, beautiful
Yeah.
question, because it places us in a position of uncomfortability, because we're so
Mm.
used to having the routines that we do and the school years that we do and the planning processes and, you know, all of that stuff. But what is it going to
Mm.
demand of our educators and our school systems, our higher education systems, our corporate learning systems, to think about, how do I now get more personal with the students? How do I now provide better support for, you know, students that don't, you know, maybe are struggling in certain areas? Or how do I lift up, you know, accelerated learners who are, you know, who are showing that type of thing? Lots of really, really interesting conversations to be had with, what are we going to do with all that extra time?
I mean, it sounds like a good problem to have, really.
It is, although now it's totally just escaped mind. There's a principle out there where it's like, you know, if you have time to fill, you'll fill it, you know, kind of one of those business propositions. It's
Yes.
like,
Yep.
if, you know, if a project
Yep.
is supposed to take 6 months, guess what? It will take 6 months, no matter how
Yep.
hard you try. So anyway, we'll see how that, but I think that's, and that was a question. I don't want to take credit for it, but a woman who's in actually your part of the world, her name is Raby. Oh dear, I'm forgetting her first name right now. I apologize. That her family name is Raby. Um, she will be presenting on this exact fact, or this exact question. It's like, where if
Mm.
you, she was on the eLearn podcast like 4 weeks ago. I'm so embarrassed that her name is escaping me. At least I got her family name right. You know, what do you do with that extra time and with these efficiencies? And it's a really unique moment in history, and to realize that, as someone who's passionate about education.
Yeah, definitely, definitely. Um, that kind of brings me to the end of the questions that I have. We did have one in the chat, which is, does class work for Teams too, or is it just for Zoom?
Uh-oh.
Pretty sure it might just be for Zoom, but we might have to take that one
No, no. Oh, I
away
see what
and
you're saying. Does it lay over Teams? No, it's it's
yeah.
it's exclusively a Zoom product. Yeah, no,
Okay.
it's that, because
Excellent.
it's actually built on top of the Zoom technology. And so I that's an interesting it's an interesting question, because then you could also ask, does it work for Google Meet? Does it work for, you know, any sort of video
Yeah.
platform? And the answer is, it's built on top of actually using the technology base of Zoom. So we know
Okay.
the answer there. And
Right.
it's Bianca Raby. I just had to look it up real quick. I felt
Bianca.
so bad at Bianca. There you go. Whew. I
Excellent.
apologize. Yeah.
Amazing. So we've talked a little bit about the AI Learning Summit throughout this conversation. Should we do just a little bit of a plug for that now while we're wrapping
Yeah,
up?
absolutely. So final plug, AI and Learning Something is AI and Learning Summit is launching on June 20th, 21st, and 22nd of this year. I say launching because all of the sessions are going to be a timed release, you know, pre-recorded session where, you know, on each of those days, the first day we're going to be talking about what are the tools of today. And that is a look at what are some of these magical generative products that we have out there. How do you build courses in seconds? How do you do transcription and subtitles, you know, at the click of a button? But, you know, it's not going to be product demos. It's going to be case studies around, there's a quality assurance case study that's coming out about how they've completely changed the way they look at assessments. There's going to be a teacher coming on from a school district about how she completely, you know, got those efficiencies we talked about, because she's now generating her coursework, you know, in seconds rather than in hours and hours. And so that first day on June 20th, that's what it's going to be all about. The second day is more of a futurist conversation about what's coming down the pipe in the next academic year and maybe 2 or 3 years out from now. And these are the promises that what we all hope is going to happen with AI, where identifying at-risk learners, you know, providing those real personalized tutoring experiences, creating truly personalized learning paths, you know, on the fly for people. And so that's what those conversations are going to be around. And then the third day is all conversations around what are the challenges that we are going to have to address together as a community around the use of AI. So ethical considerations that we've been talking about, digital divide questions, accessibility questions, equity questions, anything that you can think of where you might have to scratch your head and say, hey, but wait, but why? Those are the kind of questions that we're going to answer on that third day. Here's the best news. all of the tickets are free. There is no cost.
Yay.
Yeah, there is no cost to join the summit. Everybody's encouraged to come over to elearnmagazine.com or just type in eLearn Magazine and AI and Learning Summit. That page should pop up there. All you have to do is put in your email address, and we'll send you a notification when we launch the summit. And everybody will be invited into a Discord server to talk, to discuss, to give feedback, to give questions and answers, and those kinds of things. So hope everybody will join us.
Yeah, that sounds amazing. I'm super, super excited for that one. I feel like I might have to block out all 3 days in my calendar so that I can watch all of those videos and hear what's happening. It sounds really exciting.
I hope you'll join us.
Yeah. So we have a question. What time zone is it being broadcasted in, and can we watch anywhere in the world?
100%.
I hope so.
It's an online, it's a virtual summit. So all you have to have is a web browser. Once you sign up for the summit, we will be publishing the calendar that I do admit we're a little biased because I'm over here in Mexico and I'm the person who's hosting the summit. We will be launching, and the presentations will go live in the East Coast time of the United States, but they'll be available for 24 hours. So, anybody who gets a ticket will have those 24 hours to watch each of the presentations, review them. And then the Discord server will be open just like any other open forum. So, you can discuss at your leisure.
So 24 hours to get in and watch it. I better block off those days in my calendar.
Well, every day. So anytime a presentation goes live, you have 24 hours to watch it. And then we do put it behind a paywall. But it's a pretty modest price to get access to not only all of the AI and learning presentations, but we also include all of the presentations from the eLearn Success Series that we've had the last 3 years as well. So there's something like 200 presentations in there about how to do online learning better. So it's worth it. It's worth the $60.
Yeah. Oh, $60. I mean, that sounds like a bargain to me.
Indeed.
Amazing. Well, I think we've caught up with all of our questions in the chat box. If anyone else is still writing, make sure you type a little bit faster. Otherwise, we will go and wrap things up for the day or for the evening, as it were.
Yeah. Well, thank you very much for having me. I really appreciate it. I wish you all the best over there on the other side of the planet. Stay warm. And I look forward to seeing everybody at the summit.
Yeah, thanks so much for joining us, Ladek, and everyone else. Have a wonderful rest of your day. Bye now.